Hi, everyone, and welcome to Behind the Numbers. This is the show that goes beyond the data to explore the people, the stories, and the insights that drive business success. My name is Dave Bookbinder. I'm known as a business valuation expert and best-selling author. I thank you for joining me. And I'm excited to kick off the new year, 2026, with Doug Katz, who's the inventor of Nulu, which is an adaptive kitchen knife that kind of reimagines food prep for people with joint or mobility challenges. He's an entrepreneur and he's got a lot of good wisdom to share. Doug, welcome to Behind the Numbers.
Hey, thank you so much. I really am happy to be here.
That's great. I can't wait to unpack your story. But before I get into it, why don't you tell the audience a little bit more about who you are and what is a Nulu?
Sure. Pretty typical background. Grew up in Michigan, went to West Point out of high school, did a military career based on my commitment, got out after that, and kind of wandered the corporate landscape, but always kind of felt that entrepreneurialism would be a good place to be, and kind of tried it halfway with lending for a long time, but have been very, very fortunate to have a third act that's rooted in product, which I really never have been before, and invention. So I'm inventor of the Nulu, which you talked about, which is this. I'm sorry about the glare, which is an adaptive knife. I myself am a disabled vet, and I was a hobby knife maker. What I realized is I have a lot of hobbies that all kind of come together with helping this stuff. And then also inventor of a new product that we're rolling out called Golfresco, which is a bistro table, utility table for golf carts and UTVs that mounts universally. So a lot of my products and thinking are really kind of simple improvements when I can, definitely in the area of adaptive because it really helps me, but in maximization, optimization of space, utility, and other things.
Thank you for sharing that story. Take us all back to the origin point, Doug. What was the problem and when did you decide Nulu needed to exist?
It was my own issues, and I think that's a good lesson for entrepreneurs is go with what you know in the beginning. The narrative and everything is easier that way. My wife had gotten me a knife making class. It was sort of right in the middle of the highest popularity of Forge and Fire. And so I took the class and we were relocating at about that time. And one of the things I wanted was a shop, like a forge slash workshop. I really wanted to sort of embrace that. And I started knife making, and around the same time had pretty significant deterioration with my right side specifically. Since then, I had my right shoulder completely rebuilt. I ran the table on that one, rotator cuff, labrum, all that stuff. And there was a point in time where I couldn't make knives because that was so inflamed, and I couldn't cook. And I really do love to cook. I think that cooking is one of those base things that gives you that utility and independence and everything to be able to care for yourself and take care of yourself. So I was kind of feeling sorry for myself, but innovation kicked in. And like most makers, I have stuff all over my shop that helps with prototyping, but helps with inspiration. You might see something in a different way, solving a different problem. And I had been working with some circular designs and how people see pizza cutters and things like that. And there's actually a knife called the Ulu, which is an Inuit knife. It was the women's knife, and the Ulu knife was the everything knife. Men hunted; they needed a knife with a tip because you need to hunt, you need to do field craft. For cutting, you didn't. And I, as a team, actually this was before I even had built my team. I was kind of playing around with how can a circular design like that maximize the utility and how the force is transferred. So I came up with a really rough prototype and played around with it, and it worked. So that's when I started building a team around it and saying, okay, this is something to commercialize. And I'm like a lot of other entrepreneurs. I think I'm living the reality of your first 6 or 7 businesses will not be viable for some reason. And with this one, I was able to bring to bear all of those lessons with a good idea, a good branding angle, something that's protectable from an IP perspective that fills a need, and kind of bringing all that together. And that's helped me a lot. And as I'm doing some of the other stuff.
Yeah, I'm thinking as you're saying it, I'm a little envious. I think I can cook like 3 things well.
Yeah, well, it's very interesting as people come from different backgrounds. It just depends on sort of how that went. But you're never too late, right? You can always pick it up.
Yeah, this is true. We'll see about that, but I appreciate the vote of confidence. So when you talk about we'll call it the entrepreneurial journey, and you're spot on. Tell us a little bit about the core mission and how it's evolved over time? What's stayed the same? What's changed as you progressed?
Your timing is so awesome because I'm calling it now like a 180-degree pivot. I'm sorry, 360-degree pivot, because we started out with sort of that really impact mission based approach of being adaptive, being universally designed. We even had created we call it an ability curve that's built around redefining disability to not sort of this binary identity. It's a journey. And from birth to when they put you in the ground, you will have different levels of ability throughout your entire life. And if you base that on a task, as opposed to sort of preconceived notions, then children are functionally disabled for adult tasks. And when you think of it that way and say, oh, they just can't do it because they're kids, otherwise defined, that's disabled. So we had created this whole model, and the siren song of, hey, this should be a mass market product, right? Everyone will tell you something different. So we did sort of minor pivots along the way. And the CEO who I brought on is a traditional knife guy. So his experience was really deeply rooted in traditional knife sales. So we sort of pivoted away and said, okay, can we mass market this? And then all of a sudden, some of the seeds that we planted in the adaptive space, in some of the ways that we were doing things that were very non-standard in that space, started to bear fruit. So even in the last 2 weeks, we have pivoted back to the adaptive space. And almost a lot of my classmates from West Point went the DARPA route, where they will create a product or service or a technology and go DARPA, where they get a lot of funding and they can take it civilian. It's sort of a secular way of developing things, dual use technologies. I think there's a similar heavy disabled adaptive work, and then taking what's best and making it work in the more mass market. We were trying to go the other way. So we as a team said, we're going to go all in on this adaptive space, insofar as saying, well, wait a minute, maybe we have found things that other knife makers don't think about, because it's a knife, but in the adaptive space, that means it can be potentially reimbursed through state, federal, and other agencies that are there to help people who need something like this get reimbursed, get it subsidized, all kinds of different ways. So as we were saying, well, maybe our price is too high. It isn't if you're in a place where people can maybe get reimbursed, because then you can get truly what the utility is worth. So we pivoted back to that, insofar as even creating a tool that we're betaing right now, where if somebody buys the knife, they can enter information about their situation, and we would be able to give them some guidance on where they would most likely be able to get it reimbursed, as well as getting some verbiage and other ways that they can specifically talk about how this is a need. Going back to where our roots were and doing a 360-degree pivot, which I guess would really just be validation. Because it's hard with a product like this, until you hit the market, to understand how is it going to be perceived. And we'll see bumps when we do things in that disabled space. So I think that's been our biggest pivot. Luckily for us, that's now shaping our roadmap, because we could have been pivoting toward a more traditional product that could have hurt us, as opposed to now, this is the anchor of a cutting system, where our roadmap now is an adaptive cutting board that holds food in place, which we're being asked for all the time, because some people have bilateral issues where this helps the cutting side, but they can't keep food in place. And then we've got on our roadmap a personal consumption version. And by that, this is a preparation knife in many ways. This heel blade gives people the ability to chop. Well, you don't need that to eat. And one of my classmates from West Point who has MS tried this and loved it for food prep. And then he said, I used it to eat a steak for the first time in 10 years. But what I really would love is one that I could bring to a restaurant that's a little bit more suitable. So we've heard that also. So now we're looking more at a cutting system, and without a pivot to say, let's go deep in what we know, and actually not even be, no large knife company is going to try and do what we're doing, because they're optimized for traditional knife development, traditional knife design. That's where their branding is. So in a way, we might not even have competition, or we'll have minimal competition because it's such a seemingly niche. But what is interesting is when you go deep, and the way we approached it was by talking about task, condition, and standards, which is a military thinking. What's the task, under what conditions, and what standards define success? When you do that, and then you redefine disability, the market grows. So where someone might look and go, oh, how big can a disabled market be? I gladly will say and be able to document it's well over 150 million people. If you add in people who are functionally disabled, who this product will help. So it's allowed us to really think different.
Yeah, it's a good story. And every entrepreneur out there who's listening to this program right now is smiling when you said the word pivot, because that's something that every entrepreneur needs to do.
I think that was the biggest. I went through 2 accelerators, and I would tell every entrepreneur the best thing you could do is, for me, it was because I studied at a very light level Zen when I was doing martial arts. But the whole concept of ego death and the beginner's mind, I would tell as many as possible, go out and get feedback. That is how you pivot. Because if you get into your own groove, then you're going to be so convinced that you're right that the feedback that you're getting, you'll interpret not in a way that will help you pivot, but in a way that will make you defensive.
Yeah, that's great advice. Thank you for sharing that. Take us through the idea about scaling, because as an entrepreneur, I know you want to be responsible in scaling and preserve the essence of what really makes Nulu what it is. How do you think about scale?
Well, I think for us it's going to be a little bit different, because I think what affects a lot of companies is the need to scale super rapidly to be able to exist. We have the advantage of, I've built a team of all over 50-year-old professionals, which means that we have a degree of patience. We're bootstrapping it. We haven't asked for investment. We only have to answer to ourselves and our spouses in some case. Well, we're not making any money, but we're not in a foot race to scale in a way that doesn't work. So we actually almost put a pause button on from a scaling perspective, connecting. What we found out really quickly is this is a visual and tactile product. So no amount of scaling our advertising and marketing was going to help us the same way that getting it in the hands of people who need it would. So we slowed down and we said, what we need to do is scale awareness before we're ever going to have to scale production, which meant reaching out to the lending libraries around the country. There was a law put on the books, I think during the Bush administration, the most recent Bush administration, that said every state needs to have an adaptive program that provides at a minimum a demo and a lending library. We stopped worrying about scaling for a little bit the same way and said, let's get this out as much as possible in the ether so that people can touch it and use it. Then we'll have to worry about scaling in another direction. I think from that perspective, we haven't had to worry about the production scaling. Now, that said, what keeps me up at night is 100% how we're going to scale production. We're currently offshore production. There was no other way. We're the kind of product that tariffs don't help, because this adds price to us, but we can't produce it in the U.S. There's not the know-how to do certain scaled production of a blade like this. And we tried early on talking to traditional U.S. knife manufacturers. To a T, everyone said, make it overseas. So for us, the key to maintaining manufacturing scale is going to be having a supply chain that isn't going to be interrupted and disrupted the way we've seen. We did a Kickstarter in last year in October, and then basically ordered based on that for our initial stuff. Between when we were fulfilling our Kickstarter and when we started fulfilling our actual product, everything was bouncing around so much that it has put some concerns on the scaling side on how to do that. But one thing is that's what's nice for us is it's a singular product. And right now it is. Even our cutting board is kind of singular in that it's a one object thing. So what we're hoping is, from a scaling perspective, if we have to lift and shift to another manufacturer, it won't be hard. We'll have the CAD files. We'll already have what it should look like. We may get beat up a little bit on the price side. I think people who have a mechanical thing with gears and that's a little bit harder. It's a little bit more complex.
Yeah, you gave me a great segue because you talked about having a team of 50 people. And that's where I wanted to head next and talking about team and culture and talent. And I wanted to ask, what role did having the right team in place contribute to taking the whole thing from an idea and making it something into an executable business model?
It is, without it, I'm not here. And when I talk about the other businesses that failed, I had a pretty good team on one. I had invented a charging system for rolling luggage. So it was before charging stations and all that, or a charging system. So I was at the airport and the wheels, people walking by, and I'm like, wow, you could create energy that way. The team wasn't good. They weren't committed, a lot of part-timers. It just didn't work out. With this, I think I really stopped and said, I got to stop trying to do everything myself. I know what I'm good at. And you almost have to create a commercial Avengers. And for me, it was people who had wisdom, many of whom understood the product, people who had resources, who had the ability to withstand the startup phase. And I have just the ability to let go. And I kill myself for not recognize this before 53 when I kind of started all this. And it's the advice I give young entrepreneurs. I say, find good people who know what you don't. And if you can work with them in a good chemistry, then do it. Oh, and the other thing about that is I'm not trying to swing for the boards. What I feel I've found is my superpower on this commercial Avengers team is ideation, vision, business development, and getting out there and repping the product, because it's really indistinguishable from my own narrative. I'm not a spreadsheet guy. I'm not a designer. I don't have the patience and all that. So the ability to own that and say, I want to gain a better understanding of it so that I can fill those holes. I don't want to know how to do it, because my ability to continue to ideate and find new opportunities is 100% dependent upon someone else doing things I'm not good at. So I'm not a believer in solopreneurship, but I think the conditions could be different. But I'm not a one and done guy. I'm not, hey, this product's going to be the one thing that puts me on the map and it's going to be my fortune. I don't think that's fun. Having endured corporate America and not thrived there or enjoyed it, I want this to be my third act. And by third act, it's not I do this until I retire. This is retirement for me. And building these teams where it's fun, you can yell at each other, and it's like a family. And, that's what it's like. That's awesome. And if you don't build a culture that way, I don't think you can ever fully realize how good a thing could be. And in that, we had my eyes were bigger than my stomach, and we had originally created a structure of a holding company that was more or less going to be a venture studio. Because I had such great people, I said, guys, if we could keep this lightning in a bottle to illuminate as opposed to be a one-shot deal, we can create products and bring the process that we're learning really well to go from ideation to commercialization. If we can continue to contract and shrink that design time and go to market time, then we can actually bring this to other entrepreneurs and all that. It just didn't work out. The team didn't meld beyond this project that way. So we're disbanding that, but I'm not disbanding that vision. So that's why when I invented this other product, there's some people who are part of that project before, or who are part of Nulu, who are helping me on it. But there's another guy I found who could be interchangeable with any of them, who's just a better fit for this project. So in a way, my trade secret's going to be finding these people and continuing to build the team. And I think the over 50 market, the ageism of our country, is creating opportunity that if we don't figure this out, that it's going to be a lost opportunity. Because what I'm finding is, and I'm not a genius in saying there's artificial intelligence and not artificial wisdom. And that's trite. People have said it before, but okay, then how do you solve that problem? Old guys and girls who know things, who can look and say, what that put out is 90% of the solution, but here's what you need to do. So to get those kind of people onto your team, sprinkle in a little AI fairy dust and get some young folks who have the energy to bring things who have the ability to work the hours that are needed to do that. we should see businesses springing up around the country because the means of doing all this stuff is in our hands more inexpensively than ever before. So I kind of went off on a tangent, but once I figured out the team side of it, I said, this isn't the real value. It is, but it's replicating that again and again and again.
Yeah, I love the Avengers reference. It's a great way to describe assembling the team because, especially in the entrepreneurial situations, early stage businesses in particular, it's a different kind of mindset and a different kind of grit that's required.
And I think there is a recognition that you can't do everything. And I see solopreneur. Oh, and I was going to say, any entrepreneurs listening, find an accelerator if you can. Find one that might be um, low or no cost. I'm ex-military. There's a lot of them out there. But for me, I had gotten my MBA in the early 2000s, and I went through two accelerators. I went through Founders Institute, which is amazing for the tech world, and I went through what was Bunker Labs, but now is IVMF. And for me, that was the punch in the face to say, you know way less than you think you do. And then that's when you say, okay, where are my weaknesses, and how can I build the wall with the mortar in between that, as opposed to just being a stack of bricks that are equally as hard but don't serve a purpose.
Yeah. As you think about the future and growth, what are some of the KPIs or leading indicators that are going to matter most to you?
Well, it's got to be sales first thing, definitely. So we have to start selling more knives. And that's just what we're focused on right now. The bigger piece for me is going to be this reimbursement part. It's really interesting how, which is for me, it's nice because it's an impact KPI and a financial KPI. Because if we create the system where that can happen more people don't have to pay for the knife or pay full price for the knife. So we're solving things there, but then we're also creating a moat to our business that allow us to do that. For us, it's also product side. I want to get one product out annually, no matter what, maybe two. Our success is going to be based on, again, having a cutting system and not a single knife. We're very, very exposed if we have it that way. I think until we get a certain degree of success and fully get out of the starting blocks, we're not going to have a good idea of what KPIs get us past that initial growth phase. So a lot of them right now are getting a certain number of adaptive programs around the country signed up. So, as I said, each state has one. We're offering a knife for free to each one for their lending library. Well, I want to be in all 50 states by the end of January, and just continuing to work that way. So it's a little bit nebulous. We're dealing a little bit with the fog of war to figuring out what we have to do. But as always, margin and that kind of thing stay on top. There's been a lot more putting out fires than I expected, and we're until we know how our e-commerce platforms all work together, that will be another piece. So I think there's some operational KPIs that are yet to be determined. We had an issue with Amazon the other day where, Amazon's great at technological fulfillment. And by that, I mean their fulfillment centers are highly tech-based. But if they go down and you have inventory there, you can't sell. We didn't expect that. So we have to have KPIs for monitoring uptime and things like that to know that we're actually selling when we should be selling, because we had items sitting on reserve for 3 weeks where the thought process was, okay, it was this, but until we knew what the real problem was, we couldn't solve it. And if that's a problem across the board, we need to align our operational KPIs with that. And frankly, just right now, we don't know what those are going to look like.
Yeah. Everything you're sharing is such great insight for aspiring entrepreneurs. Really appreciate you sharing that. Getting down to the short strokes here, maybe just a couple more minutes to go, but I want to ask you an interesting question. I think if you could go back to day one, Doug, day one of Nulu, and whisper something to yourself, what would that be?
Persevere. Because I think my son said something to me once, just generally about a life journey. And he was a, he's, it was a very, very, it was wise. It was really surprised me. And I was talking about finding my way in doing this. And I said, God, I wish I had figured it out earlier. And he was like, no, it was just the right time, because everything that led up to this is what created where it is now. And with the stuff leading up to that, you don't have that. And I was really blown away by that. And your question really touches on that, because I do think, and I say, yes, there's been things that have thrown me off and unexpected things, and I probably could have avoided them, but they were such important lessons. Like one of the examples, if I had thought a different way, I would have said to the answer of that question, dump the first guy who was helping you with manufacturing in the beginning, because you wasted too many months doing that, and it cost you time. You didn't get to market at the right time, and in the big picture, it screwed you up. But that's a sort of transactional way of looking at a lesson to learn. And the guy who I had the issues with was another West Point grad who I usually implicitly trust because it's just we're cut from the same cloth. And that was my mistake, because it wasn't that he was doing anything intentionally to screw us up. He was just out over his skis, and I didn't pull the plug quicker than I should have. Well, I could say, well, I would have done that differently. But no, because by persevering and saying, okay, I just got to get past it, but in the future, trust has to be developed a different way, and I have to ask the right questions and not take my eye off the ball because I just think somebody's going to be able to do that. That lesson was way more important now for my next venture. Had I not learned that lesson, my next venture could have been less successful, and we're already to market on that in like 90 days. So I just think it's an aspect of, it shouldn't be these individual lessons. It should be, what are the lessons that are persistent, evergreen lessons, where then you become a better entrepreneur. Because there's going to be times where you're like, oh, I trusted that guy and I did it too long. And had I not persevered, all of that, it's almost like a wake behind a boat. The perseverance is the boat going. The wake are all the things that are impacted by it. But without that perseverance, you don't get anything.
Yep. Really, really well said, Doug. Thank you so much for sharing wonderful information and for sharing your story. Tell the audience how they can find you, how they can learn more about you, Nulu, and get the rest of the story.
The best place to find me, one thing I have done based on some of my podcast appearances and the impact we're making in the marketplace, they can go, I have my own personal website and Linktree, but I am starting to do more speaking engagements, panel discussions, with talking about more the disabled space. So they can always find me by typing in my name, because I have a big digital footprint. To know more about our products, Ulu-knives.com is our website, but we're also on Amazon and TikTok and all the social media. And Galfresco.com is where they can find information on that. So there's no shortage of places to find me. And the other thing is, I believe heavily in paying it forward, because it took me such a long time of being pigheaded to get help. But once I realized the help, I realized that the generosity of entrepreneurs is huge, and that too many think that their idea is going to get stolen or whatever. Anybody, reach out to me for help. I may not be able to help. It may take me a while to get back, but the generosity of sometimes friends, other times strangers, to get me to where I am. And I feel I'm far from success, but I'm at the base camp of Everest, which is farther than many people get. And I'm not there without Sherpas who got me there. So anybody who I can help, please let me know. And again, they can find me all over the place.
That's very, very generous of you. Thank you, Doug. And again, thank you so much for spending time with us today on Behind the Numbers.
So thank you.
Sure. And thank you out there for tuning into Behind the Numbers. As I say, if you enjoyed the episode, please take a moment, leave us a review on Apple or Spotify. That actually does really move the needle in helping people find the program. Also, don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss an episode. Until next time, I am Dave Bookbinder, reminding you that the numbers tell the story, but the people bring it to life. Take care, everybody.